Well, it's time now for our focus report, and the US, Ireland, Australia, Germany, Chile, all across the globe, stories of sexual abuse by priests in the Catholic Church have been reported in their tens of thousands. Investigations have concluded that it was in fact endemic. The current Pope Francis promised decisive action and back in 2013 called for an end to the cover-up of the abuse within the Church. He approved the creation of a specific judicial body in the Vatican to judge negligent bishops, but that group was never set up. Our correspondents have gone to see what has become of the pontiff's promise.
Although time has passed, Alessandro has not forgotten. Back in 2011, he used to go to church regularly in the suburbs of Milan. It was here that he met Father Gaëlle, who was in charge of teaching catechism to youngsters.
Every Monday evening we went for group confession. And on one occasion he asked me if I wanted to sleep at the oratory. But when I accepted, I didn't realize he had only asked me. After confession, we went to his room, and when I opened the bedroom door, I saw at once that he only had one bed, a double bed. At that point, I understood it was a trap.
Alessandro says he was subjected to sexual assault that night. He was 15 at the time.
The next morning, I told my mother, the worst thing you could imagine has happened.
The family immediately went to the church to report the incident, with a very specific request.
We asked that this priest no longer have any contact with minors. Then 3 months later, we found out completely by chance that he was just 20 kilometers away. And he was in charge of 4 oratories, and therefore still around minors.
This family's story is far from an isolated case. Since the beginning of Francis's papacy, thousands of cases of sexual abuse against minors have been brought to light all around the world. Although he promised to deal with this epidemic, it would seem that 5 years after his arrival in the Vatican, his zero-tolerance policy seems to be at a standstill. Father Zollner is part of the commission set up in 2013 by the Pope to advise him on this subject. Among the recommendations was the creation of an official body to judge bishops covering up for paedophile priests.
The Commission recommended the establishment of a tribunal. We said to the Pope that it was necessary to introduce something like a trial to be able to punish these bishops.
In June 2015, the Pope approved the creation of a specific judicial body in the Vatican to judge negligent bishops. And yet, this body never came into existence, leaving families like Alessandro's waiting for answers. For 7 years, they sent dozens of letters to the diocese and to the Vatican, demanding an explanation for the behaviour of the assistant bishop who oversaw their case, Monsignor Mario Delpini. In this official report from the Italian Justice Department, he admits to having relocated the priest who was flagged for presumed sexual abuse, fully aware that he would remain in contact with youngsters. Monsignor Delpini was never chastised by the Church. On the contrary, the Pope named him Archbishop a year ago. We tried to contact the Diocese of Milan, but they refused to comment. In Rome, the Pope's right-hand man in the fight against paedophilia laments the impact of this kind of behaviour on the faithful.
Many thousands of Catholics have also left the Church, scandalized not so much by the sickness and human frailty of priests, but by the mistakes and incompetence of bishops and religious superiors who fail to protect children from these predators.
A crisis of confidence that weakens Pope Francis. His closest advisor, Cardinal George Pell, in charge of financial reform at the Vatican, had to return to Australia to face trial for sexual assault. For the Archbishop of Sydney, this is part of a painful but necessary process for the Church.
We've had to learn this to our shame and be humiliated by it being exposed to the world, but this was the only way for us to move forward, to face the truth about the terrible things that have happened and the poor leadership in many cases, and to be absolutely determined that we're going to do better in the future.
A determination reiterated by the Pope. In his recent letter to Catholics around the world, he asks for forgiveness from the victims and calls for a change of culture within the Catholic Church. Statements that are not enough to restore the trust of Alessandro, who has attempted suicide 4 times since 2012.
Per proteggere la propria reputazione.
To protect their own reputation,
Sacrificano delle
they're
vite
willing to sacrifice the lives of the faithful. The institution that should guarantee morality, faith, human values,
valori alti
well, it's sacrificing human lives.
Sacrifica vite umane.
In 10 years, some 6,000 complaints of sexual abuse of minors from all around the world have been received here at the Vatican by the powerful Congregation for the Doctrine. Each file is under pontifical secrecy. The victims themselves do not have access to procedural information, and the civil justice system is unable to obtain any information.